All right, it is 11:35. I'd like to call the meeting of the Legislative Committee to order. Roll call. Oh, can I have an agenda, please? I just called the meeting to order.
They should be under county.
Member,
Okay, no, it's a movie making.
Thank you. Velocity wants to use that. I'm sorry.
That was for Gary.
And then we'll call the roll call, please. Thank
Sure.
you.
Member Chaplin. Here. Member Childress.
Yes.
Chair to start.
Here.
Member Eckhart. Ethics ordinance, here it is. Member Galassi.
Here.
Member Zay.
Here.
Oh, there they are. Okay. I got it.
Thank you so much. I move to approve the minutes, 24-0238, the legislative minutes, regular meeting of Tuesday, December 12th, 2023.
So move.
I moved.
I'm second.
Second, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Do we have any public comments?
We do not.
All right, thank you so much. Regarding chair's remarks, I already made most of my remarks in county board today, and I kind of introduced Greg Bales. I'll add a few more things now from what I said at county board already. Prior to joining Senator Dick Durbin's staff, Greg worked as a policy advisor for the Illinois Department of Transportation. He was a staffer for former Illinois Congresswoman Debbie Halverson, and he has worked on numerous political campaigns in California, Illinois, and Indiana. Before managing Senator Durbin's recent reelection, Greg took leave to elect Illinois Congressman Sean Casten to his first term in 2018 and served as Illinois State Director for Secretary Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Greg's invaluable relationships, as I said in county board today, span across state and the country, including the Illinois congressional delegation, the Illinois General Assembly, the city of Chicago, Cook County government, and in numerous municipalities and local units of government across the state and the country. Greg has spent decades building the quality of relationships we need in Washington, D.C. to move DuPage County's agenda forward. And one other notable note, he's a new dad to Rosalie.
Oh, yes,
So
congratulations.
All right, so I'm going to make the motion. Those are my remarks. I will make the motion to approve LEG-P-0001-24, the recommendation for the approval of a county contract to McGuire Woods Consulting LLC to provide consulting services as lobbyists representing DuPage County before the U.S. Congress and the federal executive branch for DuPage County's Division of Transportation, Public Works, Stormwater Management, and all of the other county departments and agencies for the period of February 1st, 2024 through January 31st, 2025 for county board for a contract total amount not to exceed $96,000. Other professional service not subject to competitive bidding per 55ILCS 5/5-1022A. So I moved, member Chaplin seconded, and now we have discussion. Any discussion, member Chaplin?
Just very thrilled to have Greg join DuPage County's lobbying team. I think it's going to be a great partnership, and I'm really looking forward to working with you, and very exciting. Very good choice.
Would you like to say a few words?
Happy to. I mean, you've heard my bio. I worked for Senator Dick Durbin most recently for over a decade. I always tell people it was one of the best jobs I'll have ever had. You get the opportunity to travel the state and really learn issues, and I spent the majority of my time in that office managing special projects, and that really entails focusing on infrastructure, economic development. Helping local government was a key part of my portfolio. I feel very comfortable working with counties and municipalities. And so a county like DuPage, I feel a big priority is how do we get the best ROI? How do we make sure that the tax dollars that come out of DuPage County are returning from Washington? And with the return of earmarks, I'm still calling them that, even if they're considered a pejorative. Sometimes they're now known as community project funding or congressionally directed spending. I want to make sure DuPage County is getting their fair share to support the initiatives that you set at the board. So excited to work with everyone. Happy to answer any questions or talk more at length, but try to be short and sweet.
Member Zay.
Yeah, no, I had questions on the contract. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, obviously, Bill Viney did a lot for us. Made many members, the chair and others sat here during CARES Act and whatever and said, we love our lobbyists. I'm trying to figure out why it's 16,000 more than we were paying our lobbyists last year. And why we have a 5-month gap where we had no lobbyists whatsoever. Doesn't really. I mean, we had 5 months where we didn't have a lobby and we're paying 16,000 more. Is there a
You know.
reason or?
I'm not aware of, I didn't know the contract.
I think,
Terminated on.
Chair Conroy, at the end of Bill Viney's contract, which was the end of August, she had recommended, Mr. Bales. He was out for about a month because his wife had a baby. Then we wanted to schedule a meeting with Chair to start.
Then I was sick.
So
Yeah.
it took a while to get the meeting together and get
Yeah.
the contract around Christmas, so it just took a little more time
Okay.
to get it going, but there was no reason. It just kind of happened that way.
Okay, well, we talk about bipartisan efforts. I mean, besides being the vice chair of this committee, I'm also chair of the Stormwater Committee, which pays for a portion of this. And I didn't really know about it until last week when the board got the email. So
You
I'm a
know,
little
and I
disappointed on
apologize for
Yeah.
that. When Chair Conroy, asked to meet with me and Greg to discuss this possible change, I should have invited you as vice chair of legislative. I should have invited you. It's my fault for that oversight. My apologies.
And
Well, I'll
Stormwater
accept some
also pays for that.
responsibility for that too, and make sure it never happens again on my part, Member Zay.
Well, I mean, is there a reason why we're giving a new firm more money than we're giving our previous firm that was with us 14 years? Is
That
just
was
the
what
contract money?
Mr. Beach, I can't really answer that. That's what McGuire Woods is charging versus,
Who would
Don't
know that? Our Valerie?
well, it was just what BGR was charging. I can't.
Oh.
Years ago, the airport authority shared a lobbyist with us, and it was Bill Bonnie for a number of years, and it was at 120. When the airport authority hired their own lobbyist, at the time, the decision was to put Bill at 80, because we figured out how much time he was spending on the airport authority. And Bill said, fine, and Bill never increased it. He never asked for an increase. I certainly don't volunteer it if they don't ask. Professional services doesn't,
So
but he never asked for an increase, so that's why it was 80. For all
So we
those
haven't
years. He
had
never
an
asked.
increase for years.
It's not like
right?
we turned it down. He never asked. So I
So for
can't
those who
speak
don't
to that.
know, the former group, Bill Vining's group was getting 80,000 a year, and the new group is getting 96,000 a year.
He never asked for an increase, just so you know, for the record.
So I would imagine.
Well,
that
glad to
Greg
see a
would
lot
be
of
doing
people have changed
16,000 more.
their ways on this, because I remember for years, we were getting a lot of blowback anytime we had a lobbyist contract coming up, that this was not needed or not, a waste of county's
You know,
money.
and I'm the one, I've said that publicly, that I'm guilty of that too. And then I came around and said publicly as well, that, I believe how much we need lobbyists, especially in DC. So I am guilty, but I came around. Remember over here, somebody had, well, I think, Cahill first. Yeah, I'm sorry, remember Cahill?
So thank you. Greg, I have a question for you. So you sound like you have tremendous experience, and that is wonderful for us as the county, especially with your personal and professional connections in DC and in the state of Illinois. But for those of us that are Republicans on the county board, I'm hoping that our legislative agenda will put forth all, like a bipartisan issues that we all care about, that you will put forth those issues that are important to us also, and use your ability to lobby to get the things that we feel are important in DuPage County, that's made DuPage County strong all these years. So that's my question to you.
Absolutely, and before he answers, I'll just say that all of our agendas are bipartisan. I will say that, and the other takeaway is that, the Bill Viney organization was Republican. So, I mean, and he did a fine job, bipartisan job for us at the county as well. So did you want to take on that question about being bipartisan?
Our whole firm is bipartisan. We have Democrats and Republicans on the staff. We work collaboratively, and as it relates specifically to DuPage County, we'll purely follow the direction that the board and the legislative committee sets for us to do. So however you direct us, that's how we'll act.
Remember you?
Oh,
Member, I thought,
Go ahead,
member, you
member.
had her hand up
Go ahead,
first. I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
I just wanted to point out that the term of the agreement, it actually commences February 1, 2024 through January 31, 2024. Because I think a former member had mentioned that, you know, for 5-6 months, we didn't have a contractor of such, but this term begins February 1, 2024. And I also just want to state that, right, the value that we place upon our lobbyists is really important. And if this is the cost that we're going to be giving, then that's, you know, we've already, the committee has already approved it. It just reminds me of, you know, CSBG grants. There are people who are asking for $55,000 versus $77,000 versus $100,000. It's whatever they are requesting. And in this situation, this is what we've contracted and agreed upon. So.
And I would like to say, regarding the money, I don't have the exact dollar amounts right now in front of me, but I have publicly said this during a county board meeting, that our lobbyists bring into the county a heck of a lot more than we spend on them. I believe our Springfield lobbyists brought in like $800,000, and they're only paid like, I don't know, $50,000 or
Well, and
something.
I think it's really hard to
So they-
put a value on. We spend probably most of our time defeating bills in Springfield for sure, as sure Conroy can attest to. And I can't put a value on that.
Right.
Defeating something that takes away your local authority. And working with ISACO now, as Mr. Bales will work with NACO, having those partnerships, but it's really hard to put a value because we talked about the hour postings in Springfield and stuff moving in DC. Unless you have boots on the ground, people, you're just not going to be effective.
Right. Member Chapman.
Thank you. So, when I first got on the board, we had several lobbyists, several state lobbyists. I know we had probably at least 3, and then we had, I'm not sure if we had 1 or 2 federal lobbyists.
We had 2 for a time.
Yes, so we were spending a lot more money on lobbyists. I think it was close to $300,000 or $400,000. So we are still well below that. And I did question the lobbyists because I never knew what we were paying for. We never saw them. We never heard from them. I heard about our lobbyists and what the work they were doing, but we never saw them. And so I asked for a copy of an invoice from the lobbyist to see exactly what we were paying for. And the invoice said July. Then I asked for a whole year of invoices. You know what was on the invoice? January, February, March, April, May, June, July. That was it. So we had no idea what hours they never came to meetings. They were not really accessible. Now we have access to our state lobbyists and our federal lobbyists, and it's been very nice. And now I can exactly tell my constituents, this is what our lobbyists are doing. We hear from them regularly. We see them, and we're still paying a lot less for lobbyists than when I first came on the board. So that's the way I look at it. We know what they're doing now, and I think we had a great relationship, and it really started with COVID with the Zoom. But we really got to know our lobbyists, and I think that's been very good.
Thank you, Member Chaplin. And if we don't toot our own horn, nobody will. And I will say that since becoming chair of this committee, I bring in the lobbyists every few months so that we do see them and we do know what they're doing. So expect calls and Zooming in every couple of months to let us know what you're doing. I believe I saw.
Person too.
What?
I just said he could come in person
Oh, yeah,
too.
you're welcome to come in person.
like
Member
it.
Galassi.
I just wanted to echo what Member Zay said, that I am just concerned about the increase of the $16,000 in the contract, and also just his lack of involvement from the bipartisan side as this kind of went down. I would have appreciated him being involved.
Member Gustin.
Thank you. Couple things. One is, can you tell us what municipalities and villages you have worked for?
Is a
Done
lobbyist.
work for as a
Yeah.
lobbyist? Yeah, that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
Lobby, okay.
Uh,
Sorry.
I was thinking before.
I know you have a new baby, so your brain is probably in a fog right now.
Sleep deprived, yeah.
The Village of Franklin Park. City or Village of Evergreen Park on the municipal level.
No, everything well.
The Northern Marine Wastewater Reclamation District, which is up in Lake and McHenry area, Lake County and Kane County.
Great. And then as a practical procedure, at the city of Naperville, we would interview multiple lobbyists and have kind of an interview process. And the question, I guess I'm not on the legislative committee. Was there an interview process?
There was.
Okay, so there were multiple lobbyists that came and people chit-chatted with them and said, hey,
Well, I
I'm not
think,
opposed,
you know,
I'm just asking
actually,
the
I think,
process.
Chair Conroy vetted other organizations, and then we brought Greg in for the actual interview because his organization was the best. So we didn't like bring in a number of organizations, but you vetted them. Did I say that correctly? Have I? Because I just want to be completely transparent.
And then as far as communication, a lot of lobbyists would send us, you know, a monthly, weekly,
He knows
whatever
that.
report.
You just,
Obviously with technology the way that it is, I'm assuming we'll hear from you weekly as to what's going on down.
actually, what I requested, I mean, the
Can we
committee
get-
I requested, every 2 weeks because I had the legislative update during county board. So when we did interview him, I requested every 2 weeks, right before county board. So I had the committee update.
And I'm not on the
Okay.
legislative committee, so I'm not
Oh.
voting one way or another. But I would love to have a copy of it too, just so, you know, it's
Cheryl, will you get
transparent.
those? Do you send?
Yeah, I forwarded
everybody?
them to everyone.
Oh,
Okay,
Bill
that'd be
Viney,
great.
when
We'll
he,
continue.
before his contract ended, he was sending an update every couple of weeks, and so did, our state lobbyists.
And you
Yeah,
sent them to the
I
state
sent them out
lobbyists?
to the board. so.
Perfect.
Good.
I believe I saw, was that it? Member Gaston?
Yes, ma'am.
Member Echo?
Well, I was gonna say sort of what Jim said, but also that I didn't see any problem with Bill Viney before, but I understand that our chairwoman is the point person for the county board. Needs to work with the people she feels the most comfortable with, so I'm happy to go along with that. But, you got big shoes to fill. And anytime you want to send, chairwoman to start a notice that says, nothing went on, so we don't have to have a report, that's fine.
What are you saying, Member Echo?
Yeah.
That's pretty common. People got places to go, things to do. Yeah. Well, probably nothing substantive occurred, so.
All right, other questions, comments? All right, well, anything else you'd like to say? Are you good?
Good.
Okay, last call. All right, well, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No,
No. All right, 2 noes. All right, it is approved. Thank you so much. Do we have old business? Do we have new business? All right, without objection, we are, oh, sorry, members A.
new business. I know we've done a lot on gun control over the years, and this issue right now of our borders, I think is on everybody's minds with the migrant issue here in DuPage. You know, now these people have to take an extra stop and come in here. I'm sure it's not easy on them having to come up from Texas or wherever they're coming from and then stopping here and then being then sent down to the city. I mean, my concern is that this federal issue is creeping in on state and local governments. And something's got to be done at some point. And we know this isn't sustainable. I mean, as someone had talked about, over 300,000, you know, crossings, you know, 200,000 illegal immigrants coming in, that's 500,000. I mean, everybody wants to point the finger at Texas. I don't blame them at all. I mean, they're being overrun at this point. I mean, they can only take so much. So, and my concern now is that the state is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this. Hundreds of millions of dollars that our seniors are not getting, hundreds of millions of dollars our veterans don't get. I mean, again, is there gonna be a cap on this? I mean, I think we should put something together where we should be asking our state and our federal congressmen and our senators, you know, this is unsustainable. This can't happen all the time here. I mean, I just came back from Arizona. Everybody says they're shipping them out of Texas. They were shipping them out of Arizona. They were on the plane. So at least 20 to 30 on the plane.
I'm a
that they're
news
shipping
junkie. I
back.
read 4 newspapers a day.
Wow.
And I do news for a living on the radio. And so based on the news reports that I've read, they're dropping people off at train stations in DuPage County, for example, because the city of Chicago has said that if people are not dropped off at certain times, the bus drivers can be fined, even impound the buses. So they're dropping the people off in suburban areas so that their buses are not impounded. Now, those communities, Joliet, Lockport, many of those communities are home rule and can make, you know, their own rules about this. As Chair Conroy said, we're not home rule, so we can't make our own rules about this. But are you saying that you'd like
But I
us to
think we
lobby
should
federally?
lobby our state and federally on this, because this is just not This is not a local issue. This is an issue that is a federal issue that's affecting everyone.
Yep.
I mean, at this point.
Member Chaplin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Dessert. So, you know, this is a very complicated, very heartbreaking situation. And well, first of all, I would like to see something, you know, I don't know that our seniors and our veterans are not getting the services they're entitled to because of this. I'm not sure. I have not heard that. I don't know that that's necessarily true or not, but, you know, I think that we're probably going to need some federal dollars here to help with the situation, probably some more federal money, whether, you know, maybe it goes to Cook County or, you know, something like that. But I think we are going to need some federal dollars to help with the situation. And
that's already happening. You've seen the Chicago mayor go to Washington DC with mayors from Denver, Houston, other places.
and so maybe collectively, you
New
know,
York.
the chairs of the collar counties could, you know, collectively go with Mayor Johnson.
To DC.
Right, you know,
Lobby.
I mean, there's things that we can do. But it just really is it's a very, very sad situation. And, you know, District 2, we had the opportunity to meet a migrant seeker, one of the asylum seekers. And honestly, the situation in Chicago is not really that great either. So the shelters and things like that. So it really is, I mean, it is a huge problem. But a lot of these people, I mean, they're traveling, you know, thousands of miles and they're coming out in the weather with nothing. I mean, they're not doing this because they have it so great back where they're from. And it's, you know, it's just a very hard situation, but I think that this is something we could work on bipartisanly and, you know, maybe get some federal dollars or something to help.
I've got Member Galassi, the Member Custom, the Member you.
Yes, I'd like to echo some of Member Zay's comments. I would like to add to the legislative agenda that the federal legislative agenda that we would like to see the federal government doing more to secure our borders. I feel like the open borders is continuing to be an issue. It's constantly in the news. I talked to a congresswoman who's on the border down in Texas, and her husband is a border patrol officer, and you know, we don't even get the whole picture. It's much worse than I think the news is even portraying. And you know, Mayor Johnson said it himself. The mayor of New York City said it himself that it's not a sustainable model. I don't know if the seniors have directly been affected or the veterans have directly been affected, but we only have one pot of money. And it's cost the state of Illinois the last number I saw was $770 million this past year. And if eventually it's going to start affecting our citizens, and we're talking about food insecurity in DuPage County, and it's just going to be a trickle-down effect. I mean, even if we're getting funding from the federal government, we need to ask the federal government, in my opinion, to do more about our border security.
Excellent. And so we just did county board, passed our state legislative agenda. Cheryl, can we put together a paragraph for a federal legislative agenda, which we'll be approving in February?
When I write it, yeah.
When-
I'm gonna write it. so
I
gotta
would
start.
like to
It'll be
say-
in February sometime.
I would
yeah.
like to say,
That's one of the items, obviously, yeah.
do you mind if I go to member you first? Member you?
Thank you, Chair. So, you know, I've been looking at the news reports as well, and WTTW Chicago and Chicago Tribune have actually just recently stated the exact amount of money that the city of Chicago has spent on migrant, and it's much, much lower than the 770 million that you just quoted. So
I was stating state
of Illinois.
State of Illinois.
well, so just in the city of Chicago, they were quoting 500 million, but it,
500 million.
right, but they've actually spent in 2023, $136 million. And most recently, Governor Pritzker has now promised 161 million, and they've also received, I think, from the federal government about 95 million. I think that, don't quote me on the 95 million. But I'm just stating that throwing out, you know, 770 million and 500 million, all those other things, I just really want to be clear that the amount of money that they're actually spending on the migrants is not nearly the amount of money that has been thrown out around there.
More.
I was stating
More.
Illinois, not Chicago.
Right. I would double check that number. Actually, 770 million when the landing zone is the city of Chicago, and they are stating that in 2023, they have actually paid out in invoices for 2023, $136 million. Second, when we met with ICDI and we actually talked with the asylum seeker, and I take exception to anybody who's going to call them illegal immigrants. It's such a pejorative term. So I'm just going to say asylum seekers. We spoke with an asylum seeker, and their main concern, what they really are looking for is housing and jobs. And so if we can reach a consensus about how we're going to deal with the migrants, the asylum seekers that are coming, then I would like to do more about affordable housing and jobs and people who are unemployed, underemployed, all of that. So we should be focusing more on that as opposed to trying to reach some consensus, because I don't know if we will ever reach any consensus about how we're going to deal with border control, which again is something that even right now the federal government can't agree upon. Do you know what I mean? So that's all I'm going to say.
Kira Marine on NBC5 said that she spoke with a number of migrants, and to the person, the number one thing they want is a job. So, member Gus.
Thank you very much. I will say, the one thing I'm concerned about is migrant safety. And they are being thrown into an environment that they have no knowledge of. They've never had exposure to it or anything else. And we don't have additional funding or funds to be able to assist in their care, in their housing, or anything else at this point. I mean, we run a very, very tight budget. Very tight budget. Chicago doesn't. I have a lot of family members there. I grew up there on the south side. It's like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And there's never any, let's balance this, right? So we really want to make sure that we have funds available, or we have some type of plan in place as to how we're going to deal with anything that might be an influx into DuPage County. And so that's my concern. The other concern I have is we have one of our lobbyists here right now. Do you see anything on your end happening on this? And is there something we should know when we get our federal agenda together? Because I totally agree that it should be on the federal agenda for our needs and our concerns here in DuPage County.
Happy to share the little I know.
Great.
I'll start with the state side. I know it's not my role, but I have heard recently there is some discussion of legislation on the state level that would institute some sort of statewide or not ordinance, but law about the drop-off schedule and how migrants are brought in. So as we discussed here, the city of Chicago has their own ordinance that limits the time frame, and it's partly to manage the flow and I'm told it's been very helpful, but counties like DuPage are the collateral damage of that, because so then they come at different times, awful hours of the night. So a statewide law could help create some structure that for non-home rule communities that cannot pass their own ordinance, it would eliminate the whack-a-mole that's currently going on. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to move on the state level or not, but that is the latest, dare I say, gossip I've heard.
And to add on to that, I know that communities like Blackboard, who are home rule, have set up a time Monday through Friday from 10 to 4. That's when people could be dropped off, never on weekends, never on holidays. So they have very specific parameters of when people can be dropped off, so they're not dropped off at 1:30 in the morning. We finished, because
I
I'm.
have a
The
federal-
federal end.
Oh, I'm so
The
sorry.
most important end, the federal end.
So federally, it's, I mean, it's a very complicated and contentious issue, right? The latest, though, is that Congress is in the process of trying to pass their 12 appropriation budget bills. Recently, an announcement was made from Senate Chuck Schumer and from Speaker Johnson in the House, an agreement on how they're going to approach those 12 budget bills. I mention those because something that's happening concurrently is a request from the White House for a supplemental appropriation. And within that supplemental appropriation deal is supposed to be funding for Ukraine, Israel, and the border. The most difficult piece of that, and it's sort of, they're all trying to get them done in agreement, is probably a border security deal. I cannot get into the nuances of what that deal would look like. I never handled immigration. It's a very complicated process. There's issues with Remain in Mexico. What are the rules on requesting asylum status? What I can tell you is it does seem to be, there is a little bit of bipartisan agreement, even if it's not public, that what they believe the influx is unsustainable. And that some of the rules on seeking asylum status may change. That declaring that I feel unsafe may not be the bare minimum threshold, if that makes sense. So trying to tell you and predict what Congress is gonna do is like, sitting there looking in the crystal ball. I mean, one day you'll think it's all going to hell, and then the next day it's resuscitated. I'll just hedge my bets and say I'm cautiously optimistic they're going to try to figure out some sort of agreement, because everyone seems to really want to pursue the supplemental deal for Ukraine and Israel. And if the way to get that done is through a border security deal, then let's see what happens. But that is what's actually happening. A broader immigration reform package, I'm pessimistic about, but that may occur, some sort of tweaks around those.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Hope that made some sense.
Chair Conran, then Member Galassi, and then Member Childress.
In terms of actual immigration reform, we all agree it needs to be done. We can certainly do a letter from our board bipartisanly encouraging that. I will do whatever I can. If I have to walk to Washington DC to encourage that, I will do that. The fact of the matter is we're in this situation because they are sending the migrants to only 3 states. They're only sending them to New York, Colorado, and Illinois. That is why it's incredibly unsustainable. My biggest concern, and what we have fought for and worked on 24 hours a day with our mayors and managers and through Craig, is making sure that they get where they need to be safely. That's my concern. I have asked the governor for some buses because I feel we need buses in case they start to drop them somewhere else, or they drop them off and leave, which is an issue. We can keep them safe, warm for a period of time. When people pass these ordinances, it creates chaos. Okay? We can't control, and we would like to control, the time that they come in. That's intentional. They're intentionally trying to cause chaos. They're intentionally trying to turn us against each other. As much as I would like to solve immigration reform, my job is to keep DuPage County safe. That's our job. And that's what we are faced with now. So my concern is that we continue to do this as best we can. I can't thank Mayor Cease in Wheaton enough, our mayor in Glen Ellen, our mayor in Elmhurst. Some of the areas where they're getting the most amount of buses have had no issues. We need to continue that as long as we can. I wish I could tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. I can tell you I won't sleep tonight because I will worry about what happens tomorrow. So we will continue to do the very best that we can. We will fight this at every level. None of us, I don't think there's a single person on this board that doesn't believe we need federal immigration law. Sadly, on both sides of the aisle, we are using people for political gain. I'm not throwing shade on either side of the aisle, guys. I'm not, but this is despicable. These are human beings.
And you're absolutely right that they're doing this to have us eat each other, and that's wrong. The one thing I'd like to say is when we're talking about a federal agenda, I would love to see at the federal level, and I know this is probably wildly unpopular, but have something for Mexico to be, there should be ramifications for Mexico for allowing these Latin countries, these Latin migrants come up to their southern border, because it's most of the migrants now are from Venezuela and some of those other Latin countries. They're not coming from Mexico. So it's up to Mexico to stop their southern border, the migrants at their southern border, and from allowing them to just traipse up the US. And I think that would be
Well, and Greg, if you could help us and guide us a little bit. So there's 2 pieces. One is it possible to put in some type of legislation, and do we need legislation to expedite their work papers? So just so that all of you guys know, when they go to the city of Chicago, it is the only place where they can get health care, they can get housing, and they can get a date to go to immigration to get their paperwork together, to be able to go get jobs. Is there a way, does it need to be done legislatively? What do we need to do to help expedite that? And my second question is, the money for migrants is going to Texas or to where they're being deployed from? Is there a way for that money to follow the individual migrant?
Well, and I think, Dawn, to your point, you know, we do give a lot of money to Mexico. Like they get a lot of funding, Puerto Rico and a lot of other areas, right? If the feds say, we're not giving you your money unless you clean this up, guess what? I bet they clean it up. So I'm hoping that legislators can be smart
Mexico
about
has
it.
stopped at their
They're all in
southern
the
border.
news now about Mexico. They are
Secretary
now,
Blinken was in
they already
Mexico.
did that. Mexico's pushing way back.
Okay.
Kind
we
of
need-
remain
we
in
need-
Mexico policy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a member Galassi, then I had member Childress, then I had, I'll have member Chaplain. It's been a long day. Member Galassi, please. take-
I appreciate what, our chair has said, and, you know, I think our main responsibility is to DuPage County. And, what member you said about, you know, we've already heard from our constituents that we do not have enough affordable housing. So this issue could very much complicate a problem that we already have for our own constituents. So if, you know, we take on or have to take on for, you know, if Chicago stops taking them, like remember, Chair Conroy said, you know, an already big issue of not having enough affordable housing is going to get much grander. So that is my concern. I feel for Texas. I mean, they have yelled from the rooftops to the federal government, we need help, and they're not getting it. So I don't know what their options are. So I really want to see this, and it sounds like it's gonna be in our federal legislative agenda, that we just ask that more is done to secure our border.
Thank you, member Childress.
I like to focus more on solutions than probably everybody knows what the problem is. I've spent a lot of time speaking to people, not only the state level, but federal level. And here's what we know, is that 10,000 baby boomers every day retire, every day. We also know that there's 10.5 million jobs in this country that is unfulfilled. We also know that our population is getting older. Okay? So what we have talked about, and I don't know how federal legislation and lobbyists can work on this, but we need to figure out, first of all, there's barriers for these migrants to work. Sometimes up to $500, which may as well be $1 million for them to get work permits. So we're in the way of that, and we need to fix that. We also know that we could engage the unions, because they could set up training, apprentice programs and all of that. We talked to a number of unions about that, and they're willing to do it, because these apprentice programs will put the migrants to work. And when they go to work, they pay taxes, they'll pay union dues. The unions will not be competing against low-paid workers because they'll be part of the union. And also, they will be putting money back into our communities rather than taking it out. So those are some of the solutions that, you know, I've talked to, again, a number of people on the federal level.
And
on the
that's
state
fantastic
level.
if they work legally. I know I interviewed a
That's
young
the whole
man.
thing. I mean, there's some, like $500 for a work permit. How am I even gonna pay for that?
Right.
You know, we're in the way, we're getting in our own way through all these different federal laws or whatever. I don't know if they're federal, state laws or whatever, but we need to look into that. If you remove those barriers, and someone over, I think, I don't know if it was Ms. Galassi or Ms. Cahill, they want to work. I think, remember you said, they want to work. Nobody wants to sleep in the snow in a tent on the streets. And if we can create an environment where they are working and paying taxes and filling jobs because there are businesses right now that are going out of business because they cannot find workers. And we have people sitting on the streets, sleeping in tents that want to work. Sometimes I think we make things so complicated because we set up these barriers as a us versus them. When there's solutions to this problem. Is it easy? It won't be easy. But at least we need to start to look on the macro level as to how we fix some of these things, because these migrants are not going away. They're here. They're not gonna evaporate and decide to go back. So we better start to, as a people, as Americans, start to look at how do you fix this problem and get out of our own way rather than keep, saying, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Stop the buses, stop everything. It just doesn't work like that. That's not how life actually works. That's not how Americans should be acting. So
Thank you.
that's all I have to say.
Member
Thank you.
Chaplin?
Yeah, and Michael, we did hear that same, from our visit with ICDI, about the work permits. It is a huge barrier for them to get these permits to work, and a lot of them are skilled, they're skilled. They know these trades. Jen we talked to, I believe, was a carpenter, so, right, so there's opportunities are missing, but I did want to mention, and I think, back in 2017, I sent a letter to Chairman Cronin, and I asked him if we would be willing to sign on to a letter with King County from Washington State. King County is very active with NACO. They're one of the top leading counties in the country. I believe there was a significant amount of counties that signed onto this letter, and it was about immigration reform, asking Congress to deal with immigration reform. They wouldn't do it. We would not put a letter out in 2017 to address, we wouldn't sign on to the King County letter with multiple other counties throughout the country. I think if some of you are going to NACO next month, I think that's a great opportunity to ask these other counties what they're doing, and maybe jointly sign a letter to, have Congress start really working on immigration reform, because it is desperately needed. This was more along the lines of Dreamers, but that was a huge issue at the time.
It still is.
It still is, but, I think maybe now's the time that we do sign a letter asking Congress to work on immigration reform. If we can get both sides, I was the only Democrat in 2017, so it wasn't going anywhere. But I'm glad that we have people that want to work bipartisanly now, and, that might be an opportunity. And maybe after you come back from NACO, and this might be a
I'm
topic
sure it
there.
will be a topic of discussion.
And
at
it
NACO.
you might bring back some great information, and maybe, I just think collectively working with other counties, and, even if we can go countrywide, that's a good way to do it.
Thank you, Member Eckhoff, and then Member Guston.
Well, I was gonna say, when Chairwoman Conroy and staff called District 4, I made the comment that there's a short-term solution and a long-term solution. The short-term solutions, well, we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis with the buses coming in and things that are out of our control, and hopefully keeping both the people coming into the country and the people who are already here safe. But then there's a long-term solution. And one of the things I would hope that you could get, because we keep talking about it around the table, and I'm not sure we have it, is what is the legal requirement to be asserted at the border to get you in legally? And I don't think it's, I need a job. Okay?
Asylum.
Well, asylum for political prosecution and things like that. So we had a situation a few months ago where we had an elected official allegedly say he wasn't gonna follow the law. And now I think we're not following the law at the border. We gotta be consistent. It's not, we need reform, because we need to process people, but we need legal migration, okay? And if we've got laws where you have to allege political prosecutor to get in, and there's something else, then they shouldn't come in. And we need ways to process people faster, and you need to just follow the law. And what you said, stop remain in Mexico, which was the previous policy, got discarded 3 years ago, and we've had this ever since. So if you could get us what the legal standard is, so we can all be on the same base and talking the same language. And then what Member Childers said, he's right. I mean, there may be a lot of opportunities for these people to come in and to do good and to do jobs, and I hope they're jobs that we can't fill and that there aren't people getting welfare who don't want to fill it because we're getting enough welfare, but I hope that there's jobs that they can fill, but they.
I don't think that's true. I think that people are looking for jobs no matter what. I interviewed
I know,
a young
I said
man.
I agree with them. I said, I hope that there are jobs that have to be filled and not that people are choosing not to take them just because they're, whatever. But, we need to, so it's two different things. Short term, what Chairwoman's doing is great, but long term, you need to come into this country legally, orderly. I even saw President Obama say that the situation at the border is not sustainable. So what are we gonna do about it? Well, we've got a law, follow the law. If you don't like the law, change the law. But don't ignore the law and just, run across the border and say, I need a job, which isn't the standard that you need to come into this country. And that's, I think, if everybody would focus on that situation, and then if you want to change it, make a proposal and change it, but until it's changed, follow it, then I think we'd be in a better spot.
I
And
keep wanting to tell my story about that I interviewed this young man who was an engineer, very highly educated in Venezuela. He worked for BP in Venezuela, and then he was outed as gay. And so he was going to, be imprisoned, or he was worried about being killed. So he came up here in March of 2020, right before the pandemic started. And so he went from this well-paid engineer, he moved to Chicago and working in a food factory, I won't say which factory in Chicago, without a work permit. So I'm saying these folks are gonna find jobs whether they have work permits or not. In my opinion, they're not gonna be on.
if they want a job, probably.
They want a job. I'm sorry, Member Guston?
Yeah, I just believe DuPage County needs to have a long-term plan on this, a financial long-term plan. And also what other options are gonna be out there. I know I have some young people when I was at City Hall in Naperville who wanted to be in the electric industry, putting up wires, linemen. And the process of trying to get into the union was so cumbersome. These young people couldn't get in. And the cost of getting into the union was so expensive, they could not do it. So as long as we can have that conversation where the unions are gonna give and take too, otherwise we're just beating a dead horse.
They have to be part of.
Yeah,
the-
and
the
so, but
solution.
this is a long-term thing,
Sure.
I think the initial, we're now dealing with kind of an emergency situation, which we should have a plan in place for that too. But long-term, because the financial impact can be, astronomical. And the type of care could really be affected, and what is available could really be affected if you don't have all of those things working together very well. So I'm glad we have a federal legislator now. He's heard all of us sit here at the table and complain. And hopefully he'll be able to bring some additional information to help us with a future plan.
Thank you. Chair Conroy.
Just briefly, keep in mind that the migrants are getting processed in Chicago. They are not required to stay there. We don't know where we've had migrants get off of a bus onto a train in Elmhurst and think they're in Chicago. So they don't know. Many of them want to be in very different parts of the country. So they will continue to migrate once they get, processed and have their papers in terms of working. That's the most important thing. So if we can expedite that, and again, it's just like COVID. We're gonna have to continue to adapt to whatever we face, and we will do that in DuPage, because that's what we do. But that's incredibly important as well. It's a concentration that is not sustainable, but they will not be staying there. Many of them will be leaving and going to other areas of the country.
Other comments, questions? Okay, any other old business? I'm sorry, any other old business? Okay, under new business, I would just like to say this. As you heard from this huge conversation, we're putting together our federal legislative agenda. So please get to me and or Cheryl. Any ideas that you'd like to see at the federal level? Obviously, she's got the immigration on her radar now, but any other federal issues that you'd like to see at our legislative agenda would be terrific. And we would welcome those. Thank you. Any other new business?
If you could just send us that standard next week.
All right, without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you so much. Great conversation.